Welcome to Teal Talk, a podcast brought to you by the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. That's OAESV for short. We're your hosts, Taylor
and Laurie.
In each episode, we speak with professionals in the field to dive deep into the intersectional issues that affect survivors in Ohio.
Before we begin, we want to give a content warning that we will be discussing sexual violence and other issues that may be upsetting and triggering. If you need help, please feel free to call our resource line at 888-886-8388 during regular business hours, or the Ohio Sexual Violence Helpline 24/7 at 844-644-6435. Please take care of yourself. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Teal Talk.
My name is Laurie Hamame, and I am the Resource and Communications Coordinator.
And I'm Taylor Ucker-Lauderman, Chief Engagement Officer. For today's episode, we're going to do things a little bit differently. First off, we don't have any guests. It'll just be the two of us, which is really not something we've done in quite a while. And we are discussing something that's definitely a hot topic right now. Some people really want to talk about it. Some people don't want to talk about it at all. And I'm hearing my friends say that their kids are repeating ads that they're seeing online. So we are talking a little bit about election season. But don't worry, we're not going to try to tell you who to vote for or what to vote for or any of that. We're mainly talking about the effects it can have on us.
Yeah, I feel like when people hear election season or see the title of this episode, they're going to think, no, not more. But it is something we have to talk about because it does relate to sexual violence. And you might be thinking, like, how does this relate to this work? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today, as well as what steps you can take if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of it. So I think we would be remiss if we just glossed over this topic, because I think it really does tie to the work that we do so closely.
Absolutely. So, Laurie, can I ask you how you're feeling during this election season, if you want to say?
Yeah. 4 years feels like such a long time. And every 4 years when this rolls around, I'm always like, oh my gosh, it's happening again. And it just feels like constant bombardment of it. It's kind of impossible to get away from it. Like you mentioned, the political ads and all the messaging online. You know, I do think a lot of it is helpful because it's important to stay educated on issues that matter. But it does come to a point where it feels a little bit laughable because some of the commercials are just ridiculous.
Yeah, for real.
It's overwhelming. It's silly. It's stressful. And all the feelings.
Yeah, it can be very cringe. That's for sure. I think I'm feeling the same. Like, I see the importance of it. I think it's important for people to talk about elections and talk about all the issues and the candidates and like how they're affected. And it's just a lot. It's just overwhelming when you're already dealing with stuff. And then maybe you're trying to like watch a funny video on YouTube and it's like, nope, I'm here to like ruin your emotions right now and remind you what we're doing. So I'm just feeling like I get it and I'm getting burnout, and that's just real. So I'm a little bit counting down the days. And unfortunately, I know too, even when like the presidential election is over and, you know, we have a big Senate race in Ohio right now and things, it's not really over. It's all going to continue just in different ways. Like we may not get the ads anymore, but the stuff will still be there. The people will still be there. So gosh, now I'm thinking, what's worse?
I know. It doesn't end once we get the results, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of getting the results, Laurie, do you want to tell the listeners a couple of important dates that are coming up? Because that's what we're trying to do today, is just provide some information and provide like a little space for kind of processing.
Yeah, definitely. So If you're listening to this episode as it's released, it'll be November 1st. So you still have a few days to get that absentee ballot postmarked and sent out. So if you're feeling like you'd rather vote by mail or can't make it in person on election day, as long as you have that absentee ballot postmarked by November 4th, your vote will still count in the election. So November 4th, absentee ballot postmark deadline. And then that next day, the 5th, is election day. So from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., the polls will be open. If you're listening from Ohio, you can go to voteohio.gov and find your voting location based on the precinct that you live in. Definitely go in and get that sticker. That's what I always look forward to on election days.
Yep. I also don't want people to feel any pressure. There's a lot of reasons why people vote, and there's a lot of reasons why people don't vote. I know plenty of people that don't vote. They've thought about it for a long time, and that's really their decision. And sometimes, like, I'll talk about it with them. Sometimes, they'll teach me something, I'll teach them something. Maybe it depends on the year, but I just don't want people to feel too pressured, right? I want folks to have information and make their decision based on the information that they have. But it's perfectly valid too if you've chosen not to vote. A lot of people are disengaged. A lot of people are disillusioned and have lost trust in the voting process and in the government in general. Also, sometimes it's overwhelming, or there's too much information, or sometimes there's not enough information, or that information is just not accessible. Or when you read it, it's like, what does this even mean? There's also the reality that we have a lot of access issues with voting. Thankfully, there's some things in place to deal with that, but that doesn't solve everything. There's still barriers in voter registration. I mean, I know someone who moved, and just that process of getting that all changed and being able to get their registration updated while life is also happening at the same time just is not realistic. You can just only do what you can do. And some people also don't vote because it's an act of protest, or they're boycotting voting. Maybe they just have election burnout or fatigue. There are a lot of different reasons why people choose not to vote, or maybe they want to vote and they just can't. So I do want to acknowledge that at the outset as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of survivors specifically feel like their autonomy or their voices have been taken away. Sometimes the system in general just feels overwhelming or frustrating, like you mentioned. And, maybe candidates aren't perfect, or it feels like the way things are will never change. So, voting is essential, but voting is also just one piece of that puzzle. Online specifically, I hear or I see a lot of posts and blaming language. If you don't vote, you caused this, or if this specific candidate wins, it's because you didn't vote. And like you said, Taylor, I just don't think that's fair, and it doesn't always paint that full picture. So I definitely echo your sentiments that people may choose to vote or not to vote for such a variety of reasons. And even myself, in years past, I felt like, do I even want to vote this year? But then I find myself feeling guilty for feeling that way. And it is something that you kind of just have to sit with, and a decision that you have to make for yourself. So like I said, voting is important, but it is only one piece of the puzzle when it comes to making change and creating a world that you want to live in. Definitely, encourage people to just sit with what they're feeling with the least amount of judgment possible. You don't have to tell people who you voted for. If you voted, like, that can just be something you keep to yourself as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Plus, even as the two of us are talking now, like, we're feeling so many different kinds of emotions and just effects from this election season. So, Taylor, I'm sure you can share a little bit about what that feels like for survivors.
Yeah, Laurie, I totally agree. And I think, too, there are a lot of people and a lot of organizations, too, that believe in the importance of voting and also have outlined how it can be important for survivors. One part of that being it's a way for you to have a voice. Again, it's just one way, but it can be considered a way for you to have a voice in the government and who's in there and what they're doing. And for a lot of survivors, that can feel good and like a sense of control. There are a lot of issues that impact survivors, whether it's issues that are on the ballot or issues that could come down the line, depending on who is in office and like who the legislators are. So, there's that perspective as well, that we need to have people's voices as a part of the process and a part of the system to see who gets in there. And that's going to further affect survivors of sexual violence in the future. So all parts of that are real. And I don't want to place judgment on anyone for whatever their decision ends up being, but just, considering all of the factors really. Because realistically, too, this season absolutely brings up a lot of emotions for people, no matter what, but especially if we think about people who've been through trauma, if we think about survivors of sexual violence, we know that election season can bring heightened emotions. It can be stressful. It can make you feel anxious. It has made me feel helpless, absolutely, in the past. And when we think about survivors who may have felt those feelings in the past, or just like being triggered by the increased conflict around this time, not only with the ads that you might be seeing in the news and on social media, but even in your own relationships with your family, with like maybe your partner, things like that. It always becomes like a heightened conversation. And I don't know about other people, but for me, that can be really triggering. And it's like, I'm just trying to maybe rest or have a conversation with my family. And this is an important topic, and it's not easy to talk about. And then it has me activated. There's a bombardment of political rhetoric everywhere. People are wearing this stuff. There's stickers, there's like yard signs. I saw a duplex the other day that had kind of like one side on one yard and one side on the other yard. And I was just thinking about the interesting aspects of living in a duplex with, people that don't agree with you. So it's everywhere. And the constant coverage of that can be really overwhelming. So for survivors, especially, this might bring about a sense of vulnerability, knowing that the topics or the policies and the discussions can and have and will in the future directly impact their lives and their rights and their intersectional identities. So what do we do with that? What are some things that we can do to deal with all of that?
What are some things we can do? Well, I always feel better personally when I'm educated on like the specific issues and candidates and policies that support survivors. There may not be specific policies on the ballot that directly will support survivors of trauma and sexual violence, but as you mentioned, Taylor, what things may come up in the next 4 or 8 years. So one way that our listeners can do that is by following OAESV's public policy work, and also by spreading awareness about those issues and advocating for laws that promote the rights of survivors. Sometimes educating, like you said, can just be tiring, and you're like, I just feel triggered right now or don't have the capacity to engage in these types of discussions. So I also think that participating in both self and community care is super important in this season of life that we're in. So whether that's therapy, meditation, taking time away from media, just creating an environment where you can just express how you're feeling without fear of judgment. Sometimes I describe my close friends as like people that I feel like I can just like let the breath go, and I don't feel like I'm like holding that breath. There's definitely some people where you feel like you're holding your breath around. Yeah. So, find those people where you can just exhale, right? And then perhaps someone who wants to vote but is feeling a little apprehensive or overwhelmed, because the act of voting can be stressful. Maybe you can offer to accompany like a survivor that or anyone really in your life, help them navigate the mail-in system or the early voting options. Get in, loser, we're going voting. I feel like you can drop a Mean Girls reference literally anywhere. So yeah, take you and your buddies to the polls. And then even after election season, right, we mentioned it doesn't stop. So continue to mobilize, continue to stay engaged with those issues that matter most to survivors. Like I mentioned, following OAESV's public policy work, because we're always advocating for reform that supports healing and protection for survivors in Ohio and beyond.
Absolutely. And like our public policy work is about providing information. So you won't necessarily find us talking about, hey, here's who to vote for or anything. We truly want to just provide information, especially as we see it pertaining to sexual violence. So I hope that kind of takes a little bit of the load off as well. Just trying to give info. But about the mobilization piece that you mentioned, Laurie, I just wanted to say too that even if you don't vote, you still get to take part after that. You still are a part of your community and this state. If you're in Ohio, I'm like speaking to Ohioans and, part of this country. And I see a lot of like, if you didn't vote, you don't get to complain or you don't get to say anything after that. And that's just not true. Like Laurie said before, it's just one part. And some people are going to feel strongly about that. But I just want to reiterate that you still get to have a say and you still get to complain if you want or highlight things or, ask questions and point out issues because that's what we need everybody to do throughout the entire political process, not just one part. You don't have to take part in any particular way, I don't think.
Yeah, it can be easy to feel like the choices that we make, the small and the large, are just these tiny drops in the ocean, but every drop creates a ripple. Whatever you choose, and whatever way you choose to engage, you are making a difference.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. Yeah. Thank you for that beautiful metaphor. I absolutely agree. What else do we want to say to folks? I want to reiterate to take care of yourself and take care of each other. And remember too that if you can find that group of people that lets you take your breath, that it's really important to be in space with them in some way. I know it can be easy to like isolate yourself, speaking for myself, but realistically, I do believe that we do better with each other. So consider leaning on those folks and trying to maybe minimize and control the information that you're taking in. There is a lot. And if you want to turn off notifications or put filters of some sort on your social media or what have you, then that's totally understandable. You do not need to take in all of the information. And I encourage folks to set their boundaries and keep them as much as they can because that is needed. We were never meant to take in this much information at one time, and certainly not constant election messaging that is confusing and purposefully triggering and just overall tough.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say that there was a point in my life where I felt like disengaging from news media was like something I was able to do because of privilege. And it is, but I felt guilty about that. But over time, I've grown to understand, like what you said, we are not meant to take in all of this information at once. I think back to how news was disseminated years and years and years ago, and there are people in the streets like hot off the press, like you had to go get your newspaper or, you got your news, once a week on a Sunday. And now like having it at the tip of our finger 24/7. And like every side, every person's opinion, the comment sections, just don't look at the comment sections. I always say like social media is accessed by people of like every single age, every single walk of life. And I don't think that we can have those types of meaningful engagement on a platform like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And back in the day, candidates definitely couldn't text you 5 times a day begging for $5.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Anything else, Laurie?
I will just mention that on voteohio.gov, so not only can you find your polling location and information about absentee ballots, but you can also view a sample ballot. So you can be prepared for what you're going to see on the ballot when you arrive. Sometimes I feel like the way things are worded on ballots are like confusing. So I like to be able to see the ballot ahead of time. And you're allowed to like bring a little Post-it note if you want to write people's names down. There's certain issues. You're allowed to do that. 'Cause sometimes I feel like it's hard to remember a bunch of names and do I vote yes or no, or how do I feel about this in the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always feel a little bit nervous about that. So I'm glad you mentioned it. It makes me feel more affirmed. I think as long as you don't have something that, everyone can see and you're not like flashing it around, but you can have the information for yourself. So, but yeah, there are lots of really helpful voter guides online. Another organization that I think is helpful with voter guides is called Innovation Ohio. They generally do a voter guide every year. So, yeah, I encourage you to look around, look to organizations that maybe you're already interacting with, or even just doing a little search and get yourself a little treat. No matter if you vote or not. I'm trying to think of like, what do I do when I go vote? Get yourself a little treat if you can, and take a break if you can. No matter what happens, the day after or days after the election, as we know it can go, multiple days are going to probably be pretty stressful. So remembering that as well, and maybe planning ahead as much as you can. I know it's a privilege to be able to like take off work and disconnect from things. If you have that privilege, maybe do that. And if not, just bringing in whatever tools you can. Listen to that Calm app on your headphones at work or something.
Yes, have that squishy stress ball or fidget toy or essential oil diffuser. Yeah, whatever you need to attune to your senses, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Laurie, for talking about this. I know it can be a very not exciting topic for a lot of reasons. So I appreciate you having this conversation with me. And thank you to everybody who is listening. We hope that you will keep listening to our future episodes. And if you missed any past episodes, please check them out. This is our 3rd season. So there are plenty of other episodes of Teal Talk to listen to. We hope this information has been really helpful and has provided some sort of support to you, no matter what you decide to do as we round out this election season.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I hope this episode was helpful, and we will catch you next month. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Teal Talk. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into intersectional issues affecting survivors in Ohio. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and review, recommend us to a friend, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at OAESV and Twitter at Ohio Alliance ESV. If you'd like to learn more about us and the services we offer, sign up for our email list, or read a transcript of this episode, visit oaesv.org.
Want to share a comment or ask a question for a future episode? Just click on the link in the show notes to leave us a voicemail. And remember, we're here to help. Feel free to call our resource line at 888-886-8388 during regular business hours, or the Ohio Sexual Violence Helpline 24/7 at 844-644-6435. See you next time.